this other day we were flying around Fort DeSoto, and I'm at my kind of typical altitude, like 300 feet or below, and I'm coming around the island doing a fairly sharp turn to head back north, and another airplane comes around the other side right at me, and I'm like, whoa, what's this crazy guy doing down here so low? And oh, hey, that's Bobby Klein in his pits. So I get on the radio. The Squirrel Squadron back then usually had set frequencies for air-to-air talking. So I get on the radio and I'm like, hey Bobby, what are you doing? And so he's saying, hi Mike, oh, I'm doing great. And I said, Bobby, do a loop. So up he goes, and he does a loop. I'm like, hey Bobby, do a aileron roll. So Bobby does an aileron roll. And this goes on for like half an hour. Just watching Bobby do his acrobatics while we're flying around Fort DeSoto down there. So that was kind of a fun day too. One day I flew into Sun and Fun and went over to the FAA tent. Actually, it was a building at that time. And they had a little computer set up there with a flight simulator, screen, and a joystick and everything. So I'm flying the joystick, the simulator, and I'm doing, I'm probably like 50 feet up. I'm really low. But I'm doing rolls and loops and wing overs and Immelmans and all kinds of stuff, and just flying like crazy, man. And the FAA guy is sitting there watching me, and so he's like, hey, I hate to ask this, but how'd you get here? And I says, well, I flew in. And he goes, I was afraid of that, but so because he'd been watching me fly, and I don't think that guy would get in a plane with me, but anyway, that was funny. The next story was kind of an interesting one. George Reed was later in the day flying his Breezy airplane. So it was a biplane Breezy, and it took off at about 50, it flew at about 60, and well, that's about all it did. Didn't have any lights on it, didn't have anything on it. But he's over Treasure Island Beach, and the left side, the horizontal tail fin just folded back, and lots of times that would kill you. That'd be about the only thing he could do, but he still had the right tail horizontal stabilizer, and he could still control the airplane. So George came in and landed on Treasure Island Beach, and we all heard about it, phone calls between everybody, and so half of the squirrels jumped in their car and head out to Treasure Island Beach. One of them brought a little welding equipment, and at least I believe we welded it. Anyway, they patched up the tail that had folded back, made that pretty secure, and but now it's like 8 o'clock at night, it's dark out. So we're like, what are you going to do? George decided he would just take off from the beach, fly around Pinellas County, and get back into Albert Wooded. So we're like, hey, it made sense to us. So he takes off from the beach, and everybody jumps in their car and heads back to Albert Wooded. And George finally arrives back at Wooded, and of course he doesn't have any lights on, and the tower's closed by then. It's dark, it's night. And so George lands, and he pulls in back to his hangar, and everybody's at the hangar, and they're putting the airplane away and closing up the door and stuff. And then all of a sudden, all these cars and lights and sirens appear down there. The DEA had gotten a phone call that an airplane landed at Wooded at night, and they all came down there to investigate. They figured it was a drug running plane. So George, he's like kind of put back by this, but by that time, all of the Squirrel Squadron is up against the hangar. You know, they're all putting their hands against the hangar, and they're getting frisked to see what they got and what's going on there. And George had said back then that, you know, if he knew that they were looking for dope, he has lots of dope in the hangar. Dope is used to fill out fabric cloth before you paint it. It finishes up your fabric wings. But he was just joking around. So I don't think the DEA guys really got the idea of the joke. But the DEA spent like 30 minutes looking over this tubing fuselage airplane for where he could hide his dope. And obviously there was no possible way of hiding dope on that. But, so that was the night that the whole Squirrel Squadron got frisked and held up against the hangar door. Kind of a crazy time. So George, like I said, was kind of a interesting fellow. He went up north to pick up this mini Jenny. It was I'm not sure if it was a replica or a real one, but it was an antique flying airplane, very slow, not much road performance to it, just barely could hang in the air. But he's coming back and he's up by Cross City, and the clouds are getting lower, the ground is getting higher, and it's getting kind of nasty there. So, the turbulence was getting really bad because of storms in the area. So, as George is flying along, he said this burst hit him, and it flipped the Jenny upside down and put it in a flat spin. So now he's upside down, he's a flat spin, he's like, I'm dead, I'm a goner. But upside down, the plane crashes into the pine trees, and George finds himself alive, hanging upside down from these pine trees, and he's like, wow, I survived. So he climbs down out of the Jenny, and he's standing at the bottom of the forest, and he knows that Highway 19 is to the west, but he has no idea which way west is. Realize he was doing an upside down spin, so you get very disoriented when you're like that. But he does know that there's a compass in the airplane up there in the pine tree. So he climbs back up the pine tree and takes his pocket knife and he hacks the compass out of the dashboard. And so he's got the compass in his hands, climbs back down again. So he's on the ground, he's got his compass, he knows to go west to get to US Highway 19. So he's walking and walking through the forest, and pretty soon he comes upon some people that are coming into the forest. Someone along the road or somewhere had called in that an airplane had crashed out in the forest. So all the rescue services were on their way in to find the airplane crash. And they asked him, did you just crash in an airplane? He says, yeah. And he says, before he knew it, they knocked him to the ground, they were cutting off his new blue jeans, and he's like, get away, go, just leave me alone, he's fine, no problem. But he was so pissed that they cut off his blue jeans. But that was a pretty crazy time for George too. This story came to mind. Back when I was learning how to fly tail draggers, my friend Harry Fletcher took me out in his Chief, and he was teaching me how to fly the Chief. So we flew down to Manatee Airport and to do some practicing down there. We're coming in for a landing, and I don't know if you know grass fields. It's kind of sometimes pretty hard to figure out where to land. You have to look for like tires or orange things along the side to mark the runway. And the runway kind of looked a little dark, but so we came in for a landing there, touched down, and immediately after touching down, you hear this noise where the tires were picking up stuff from the runway, from the grass, and coating the bottom of the wings. It had turned out the sludge truck had just come by to fertilize the runway, and we landed in that stuff, and man, did it make a mess out of the airplane. The bottom of the wings were just covered with sludge, and yeah, it was a real mess. So it took a couple hours once we got back to clean up that mess. But